All right. All right, we are recording. All right, so welcome everybody. Welcome to Colchicums for Fall Color. I'm Jan Beglinger. I'm the Cornell Cooperative Extension Master Gardener Coordinator. If you don't know who I am, I think we have a lot of Master Gardeners on today. This is a program that I've been wanting to do for a while because I got hooked on Colchicums a couple years ago when a friend gave me a few that she had divided from her garden. And when most people think of bulbs, they actually are thinking of spring flowering plants like tulips or daffodils, or maybe some of the summer ones like your alliums and your bulb lilies. But fall's the often forgotten season. We all plan for a lot of color in spring, and then we kind of peter out when it comes to fall. But that's prime time for these beautiful bulbs called colchicums. They're lovely, they're carefree, and they're kind of ephemeral in the garden. And I would say they're a great garden jewel in the fall. So what are they? Well, I put the Latin up there for us. So it's Colchicum, just kind of the way it looks. They're a group of fall flowering bulbs, and there are around 70 named cultivars and 35 fall blooming species. While I was doing the research for this, I also discovered that there are some spring flowering colchicums, which I did not know. So they have some common names: meadow saffron and autumn crocus, because they look like our spring crocus. But there are also fall blooming crocus, which kind of confuses people. And then a fun name is called naked ladies. I think it's because they bloom without the leaves, so the ladies don't have their skirts in the fall. So the colchicums are not a true crocus. They're their own species, and they are separate from the crocus family. Most of the flowers are a large vase-shaped bloom. They come in kind of the pink, lavender, violet, rosy range of colors. There's also some white ones. They do come in single and double flowers, and then their flowering times is mainly September through October. The foliage actually appears in the spring, and they're not a true bulb. We kind of use bulb as a generic term for anything that goes in the ground in the fall, but they're actually corms, again, like crocus, which leads to the confusion even more. And each corm will produce numerous blooms. Generally, they're hardy to zone 4, which is colder than us, but some are only hardy to 5 or 6, so it's good to look at some of the varieties. And if you're not sure what your hardiness zone is, if you're from New York State or Western New York, Batavia is a zone 5, and if we go south of Batavia, it's mostly zone 5, and if we go north of Batavia towards the lake, that tends to be zone 6. We get a little bit of buffering from Lake Ontario, and if you go towards Buffalo, the closer you get to the lake, you're also probably a zone 6. So one thing to know about colchicums is all parts of the plant are poisonous if ingested. And they are native to Asia and Europe. And usually they're found in high altitude meadows, which makes me think mountain areas, but maybe not actually mountains. So that gives you an idea of some of the weather conditions they may need. I found a really interesting article on this Garden Fundamentals website on the life cycle. So I thought we'd run through that quickly because they are kind of an odd duck in the plant world. Right now, the bulbs are actually dormant, so it's the best time to divide or move them. So anybody who's selling colchicums, that's what they're going to be doing now, is you're going to be digging them up and getting them ready for sale. In September and October, their growth actually begins, and I don't know if I can have my pointer. Well, you can see in the picture at the very bottom of that tube are the roots starting. And the bulb is actually in that tube. Let me see if I can find a pointer. Well, I don't know where the pointer is. So roots develop in late September, October, and then like crocus, they form daughter corms. So you have the original bulb, and then a daughter bulb will start to form from it also. In November, December, flowering is usually done by the end of October into November. If they form seeds, they actually start to form underground, and the leaves actually start to develop at this time. Now, from what I read, the leaves will start to develop and they'll almost push up to the soil surface, but they won't break through. So they will sit there that way through the winter. In the winter, the roots are active underground, they're feeding the bulb. And then March and April, depending on our weather, that's when the leaves will emerge. And in the picture here, this is in my garden, and I pointed out where the colchicums are, and this was sometime in April. And then the seed capsules will continue to form down in the leaves. May and June, the leaves will actually start to yellow and die off. The roots start to die off, the seeds will ripen, and the mother corm is now depleted, and it's the daughter corm that's ready to take over for the next blooming season. So the new corms are formed each year on top of the old ones. So your clumps actually increase in size, just like crocus or daffodils. So once you plant one, you're going to end up with a grouping of them. And you could call them long-lived. I've had colchicums in my garden. I don't remember exactly when I started growing them, but the clumps are pretty long-lived, but they do benefit from regular division. And the recommendation I found was to lift and divide them every 2 to 3 years after the foliage fades, so July, August timeframe. I have not been real good about lifting mine unless I need to move them. So I just like the clumps to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But if you want to move your clumps around or increase the number you have or even share them with friends, lifting and dividing them is one way to do that. Well, why would you want to grow them? Well, in fall, we all love that extra splash of color in the garden. And because, again, they're toxic, the deer do not eat them. So if you have a deer problem, or some of those other critters that eat your crocus and your tulips, these are unpalatable. The deer, voles, mice, chipmunks, squirrels will not eat them. The one thing I have found, though, is that for some reason, the slugs and snails will attack the flowers. So sometimes the flowers look kind of ratty looking if you have a high slug or snail population. And the flowers will provide nectar and pollen later in the season, so that's good for our pollinators. I'm going to have to look at my bulbs this year and see who's actually going to them. I guess I haven't noticed if bees or other insects are using them in the past. And where do you plant them? Well, these are interesting because, again, the bulbs are shipped in September normally. Some of them will ship in August, depending on where the bulbs are coming from. But you need to plan on planting the bulbs as soon as they arrive, because if you buy an earlier blooming variety, they're going to be ready to bloom when you get them. So these are large bulbs. You want to plant them at least 4 inches deep. The recommendation is to plant them 10 or 12 inches apart. So that's roughly 3 bulbs per square foot. You can plant them a little bit closer, but just be aware you'll probably have to dig up and do some dividing in 2 years. They like moderately fertile, well-drained soil. I grow mine in full sun. In warmer regions or hotter regions, they do like a little light shade. They do prefer a soil that doesn't dry out in the summer. So that's something to take in consideration when they're dormant. And they do need shade where summers are hot. When you're planting, you want to water the corms after you've got them in the soil, just to settle the soil, remove any air pockets, and then you don't have to water them again until they start to bloom. So plants will emerge and bloom within a few weeks. Flowers will last for several weeks. Now, in the fall, we generally have enough rainfall that I don't usually have to water mine once I've planted them. So you just have to watch the weather on that. If we have a dry fall, then you want to give them some water because the roots are also starting to develop, so you want some moisture for the roots. In the spring, again, the bulbs produce those large, coarse leaves, And like our other hardy bulbs, you have to let the foliage mature in order to feed the bulb, the corm, so you get a fall flower display. And then the leaves will disappear by early summer. So this, you also want to take into consideration this when you're planting them, because you're going to have that foliage in the spring. I like to plant mine at the front of beds, basically because you want to put them somewhere where you're going to see your flowers. In front of shrubs is good. You can plant them among your perennials, but you want to make sure that it's a perennial that you can either cut back in the fall when they start to bloom, or in between perennials where you've got space. Like I said, I like to plant mine at the front of my borders so that I can see the flowers. Some will naturalize well in meadows or woodland edges. However, if you're putting them in a lawn situation, you have to make sure that you don't mow them until the foliage dies back, which is June basically. So most of us will not be growing them in our front lawns. They, like other bulbs, they look best when they're planted in clumps or sweeps or groupings rather than just, individual soldiers. And you want to avoid planting them in places where you've got a lot of leaf fall and the leaves will, or the flowers will get covered up by leaves in the autumn. So I thought we'd run through some of the species and some of the varieties. Colchicums can be difficult to find, so hopefully I picked ones that are going to be readily available. That's what I tried to do, but I wanted to give you an idea of the variety that there is in the species. So this is Colchicum giganteum. It's one of the tallest and most free flowering, and it will bear up to 10 funnel-shaped, extra large lavender pink flowers that have a delicate white throat. This one blooms in September and will grow up to 8 inches tall, and it is zone 4 hardy. Colchicum agrippinum is a hybrid of unknown parentage. I've read that it's described as a bit fussier than some of the other ones, but I think it would be worth trying if you can find it because of that checkered or tessellated markings on it. I think that's just a really unique flower right there. Autumnal album is a dainty white flower that the flower shape is kind of a goblet. They emerge toward the end of the colchicum season, so they flower sometime in October. And you can see there that you get a nice grouping of flowers. Autumnal alboplenum, of course, is this beautiful double. It's a sterile cultivar with this creamy white flower. It's short and quite weatherproof because in the fall, of course, who knows what the weather's going to be. The flowers are very long lasting, and this one is generally widely available. Autumnal pleniflorum is a double lilac pink variety in mid-fall blooming. And I think that one's very pretty. The speciosum, if you have the true speciosum, it should have fragrant goblet-shaped lavender flowers with a white throat. They grow up to 5 inches tall. And there seem to be many labeled as speciosum which are not. And this does seem to be an issue in colchicums in general. I think because some of them do seed that sometimes maybe a seedling will get in, or somebody's, as the lines get passed around or passed on, maybe somebody changes a name because they have something slightly different. So sometimes we're not quite sure if we got what we say we've got. But speciosum should be fragrant, so you can check fragrance on that. Byzantinum album, this is an heirloom selection, and it sends up a ton of large white, we'll call them chalices of blooms that have a hint of purple. And this is an early bloomer in the colchicum season. Now this one, I did find that it was rated at zone 6. So a little less hardy than some of the others. The species Byzantinum is one of the earliest to bloom, and it has this distinct shape with the narrow petals. It is a pale pink color. The blooms actually open kind of cup shape, and then the petals spread apart that you can see in the picture. Now this one I just love. I don't have this one yet. I'm working on it. It's called World Champions Cup. The broad ovate petals form a large cup-shaped flower that sits atop a 4 to 5 inch tube. So colchicums don't actually have a stem. They have this tube that they grow up from. The lilac-colored blooms give off a very noticeable and pleasant fragrance. And this is an early mid-September bloomer. Rosy Dawn is a late flowering cultivar raised over 70 years ago, so it's another heirloom variety. It's described as very strong and often fertile, so seedlings will eventually occur. Mauve Wonder has soft purple blooms. It's a shorter height, so it's good for the front of the border, or if you want to try something in containers, this might be a good one. I've not tried colchicums in containers, but it might be worth doing it, especially if you're digging up and dividing and you've got some extras to play with. This is rated for zone 4. Violet Queen is one of my favorites in my garden. It's a hybrid with violet flowers that have white lines in the throat and distinctive orange anthers, which you can't see in the photo. Now, Harlequin is the English translation for this named variety. It's very uniquely colored, as you can see. It has a very distinct shape, so you can kind of see how it came by its name. The petals are bicolored. The lower half to 2/3 of each is that pinky purple with the white tips. Excuse me. So those white portions roll inward, giving the bloom the appearance of a court jester's hat, is how it was described. Water lily is one of the most commonly available varieties. It is a sterile hybrid with large lilac pink flowers with multiple petals, often up to 20 on one bloom. And it does resemble its namesake, a water lily. Its flowers often need support, so you may want to plant it in a low ground cover like they have here. This is Angelique sedum, in order to prevent the flowers from falling over. And then Lilac Wonder is another heirloom variety that blooms mid to late fall. The large flowers have narrow amethyst petals with white lines in the center. It's said to be one of the most free flowering, and it is rated for zone 5. It's pictured here with Hosta Gold Standard, and I love this color combination with that gold foliage and the purple blooms. So if you have some gold foliage plants in your garden, you might want to consider putting the colchicums next to those. And colchicums will naturalize in the garden. So here's a photo of Mauve Wonder that has naturalized. So over the years, you can get a nice grouping of them. So when is the best time to buy colchicums, and where the heck do you get them from? Well, generally, I make a note on my calendar to start looking in June. You can order through August. The earlier you order, the better, because some of the rare or popular varieties may sell out depending on who you're buying them from. Companies will start shipping their corms in August or September. If you see a colchicum that you want, get it. That was the best advice that I've seen. Some of the colchicums are more common, but some of the name varieties may not be offered every year. So some of the places you get them are smaller companies. They may be growing them themselves, and they may have limited stock, and they may run out from year to year, and they may have to rebuild their inventory. Colchicums are not inexpensive. You may get a little sticker shock when you look at a catalog for the first time, but the bulbs are large and they're a good investment for the perennial garden. So that was probably one of the reasons that I didn't put colchicums in my garden until somebody gave me a couple, and now I'm kind of hooked. And again, we'll talk about that name confusion. They're not always true to name, or maybe you buy the same plant bulb from 2 different companies and they look slightly different, or the same species or variety may be sold under different names by different companies. There does seem to be a fair amount of name confusion in the industry. When you're buying colchicums, they're generally not available locally in nurseries. So I always have gotten most of mine online through either a catalog or a company that I've found. And I'll give you some names of companies that do sell them. But whenever I'm buying plants through a catalog or online, I like to make sure that the company has some kind of guarantee. Either a refund or credit or return of your money. Well, that's a refund. But when you get the bulbs, inspect them immediately. If something is wrong or you feel it's wrong or the bulb is moldy or mushy, they should be nice and firm, just like a daffodil bulb that you would be buying. Then I would take a photo of it and contact the company immediately. Most will be pretty reasonable if you contact them within a few days of getting your shipment. And if you are ordering other fall bulbs from the same company, just be aware that some companies do have a separate shipping charge for the colchicums because they ship them earlier. They're not going to ship them with your daffodil order. And they are fairly heavy, so it does cost them extra to ship them. Where to get them? So I've got 4 vendors up here that do sell them. I'm not necessarily endorsing them, but I wanted to make it a little easier for you to find them. Brett and Becky's bulbs, I believe they're out of, excuse me, Virginia. I have ordered from Brett and Becky's in the past. They have in their catalog a full page of colchicum species and varieties. So I've been pretty happy with the bulbs, any of the bulbs I've gotten from Brett and Becky's, and they're very good with their customer service. Odyssey bulbs I just discovered this summer. They're online and a smaller company. They do have a nice listing of colchicums. They actually have some of the spring flowering colchicums. So yeah, I put an order in, so we'll see how we do with those. McClure and Zimmerman has a catalog which you can get. And again, they have about a page of colchicums that you can look at. McClure and Zimmerman, I've ordered from them. Their quality is pretty good. Their customer service is okay. They do have some what they call sampler packages. So if you just want to try a couple or get a little bit of each and see which ones you like, their sampler packages are sometimes a little less expensive than buying a grouping of colchicums. You usually can buy colchicums singly or in groups of 3 to 5 usually. Now, David Burdick, Daffodils and More, I have not ordered from him. He does have a website. If anybody is interested in his order form for colchicums, I do have a copy of that. I couldn't find it on his website, but another colchicum lover sent it to me. And you can also email him at the email there. He does have a pretty good listing, and I believe he grows them all himself, and he's out of Massachusetts. Now, other companies will sell them like White Flower Farm or American Meadows or some of the ones I listed on the pictures there. But most of those places will only carry maybe 2 or 3 varieties of colchicum. They don't have a big variety of them. And this is what you get when you get your order. So this was my order last year. I had ordered apparently an early blooming variety, and it bloomed in the box. So all you have to do is get them in the ground as soon as possible. Obviously, you've lost the blooms for this year, but I still plant them 4 inches deep and just try to be careful with the bloom and maybe enjoy it for a little bit. But I do check them over, so make sure the bulb looks healthy. And this is how big the bulbs are. So that's the palm of my hand with 1 bulb. So they are pretty large. And this is one that was getting ready to throw its flower up. So you can see how that looks. And again, I just dig down, put them 4 to 6 inches in the ground. And a couple weeks later, this flower will emerge. And then I just wanted to show you some ones of the ones in my garden. And I'm sorry, I don't know the names of them. I couldn't remember which ones they were when I was looking through my photos. But as you can see, I have some sedum there. So these are on the edge of my beds usually with other ground covers. And then I have some mixed in here with some perennials. So you can see how they come up in the fall. And then here's a bed where I was putting them kind of in a circle. Now this bed, I think what I'm gonna do this weekend is I'm gonna have to go out there and dig those colchicums up, because in the middle there's a giant fleece flower, which has grown a lot faster and spread more than I anticipated it to do in a short period of time. So I don't think my colchicums will be visible this fall unless I cut it back hard. So I think I'm just going to dig the bulbs up and reposition them somewhere in the garden. And then this is spring, so you can see the foliage coming up in front. This was April 9th. And then this is what it looked like at the end of the month. So you can see the mounds of foliage just behind the sedum there. And this garden bed, I actually over time edged the front of the bed with the colchicums for the fall. And like I said, I did it over time because it was a bit on the expensive side to do it all at once. And this year I noticed I had some seed pods. So this was the end of May. And then this was middle of June. So this is what your seed pods look like. And you can see the plant is yellowing. And I found this good article on actually sowing colchicum seeds from this plantworldseeds.com. This was their advice. I've not tried sowing colchicum seeds. I just let them fall to the ground. But according to this, you can sow seeds at any time. You should cover them with compost or 2/10 of an inch of grit. You want to keep the seed container outside in a cool, well-lit spot. You do not need to give them any kind of heat because that seems to prevent germination. And they do need to seem to go through a chilling or freezing period before they will germinate. So I was wondering if this would make them a good candidate for winter seed sowing, which some people do around here. Once you have seedlings germinated, you can pot them up in small pots and then keep them in pots until they're big enough to put out in the garden. And I'm not sure how long it takes to go from a seed to a bloom, but I'm assuming it could take a couple of years. All right, a couple plugs for our Master Gardener program. If you do have questions about colchicums or anything garden related, our office is open and the Master Gardeners are here Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to noon. And there's a couple ways to contact them if you do not want to come in. You can call or email them. These are the various resources that I used to put some of my extra information in. There was a great article from Wisconsin Master Gardeners. Garden Fundamentals was the life cycle. thehardyplant.org was where I got some of the images. Cold Climate Gardening. Karen does a blog and she's written several articles on colchicums and has pictures of them from her garden. American Meadows had a nice article on them, and Gardens Illustrated had a nice article on colchicums for the garden. So there are resources out there if you want to learn more about colchicums. And I'm going to put a little plug in for our Master Gardener fundraiser that we do with Brett and Becky's. So they very generously have this program called Bloomin' Bucks. And if you go through their Bloomin' Bucks website, and you look for Cornell Cooperative Extension of Genesee County, and you put us in as your nonprofit organization that you want to support, we will get a check from them, and they will give us a percentage of the sales that they get through with the Cornell Cooperative Extension on their on your line there. So anybody who's interested, thanks for your support, and you get bulbs out of it. For future programming, it's always good to check our website, genesee.cc.cornell.edu. Our events page will list upcoming websites. I think we're going to be pretty much virtual for the rest of the year, especially with Garden Talk. I will probably be coming up with some fall programming, so it will be listed there. And we also have a Facebook page, and we've started a YouTube channel. So this will be up on our YouTube channel probably next week sometime. Our past garden talks from May and June are there, as well as some of the spring programs we did earlier when we were in shutdown. And we've also, the Master Gardeners have also started a virtual garden tour channel on our YouTube page. So because we can't really go around and visit everybody's garden this year, some of the Master Gardeners are doing, 10 to 15 minute videos on their gardens or parts of their gardens. And we also have some other videos up there. So go to our website. The links are there for our Facebook page and YouTube channel. So thank you for attending today. This is Molly, my garden cat, with a couple Colchicums.